I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody. Welcome to West Point, Mississippi. And it has rained recently, guys. That kind of changed everybody's attitude a little bit. It has. It's when you see rain on the horizon, Mac, it's so exciting when you know you've got seed in the ground or you're trying to get seed in the ground.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and everybody around here is running around.
Yeah. Lane, did you get everything planted?
No, I never get everything planted.
There's always more.
Yeah, there's always more to do, that's for sure.
Toxie, what about you? At least the bulk.
I'm like past the disaster stage at least, yeah. And we got good rains, like
we did.
A week apart, and so
timing was pretty good.
For as dire as it looked about 2 weeks ago, we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's good to hear. There's been some, guys, there's been some blood on the biologic. We've got, do y'all know Travis Sumner? We all know him.
Oh, yeah.
Over there in South Carolina.
Absolutely.
His 81-year-old dad killed a 200-pound 8-point in South Carolina. That's
a giant
big
deer in South Carolina.
Sure is.
It's a giant deer here.
Yeah. And you know, there's a biologist over in Alabama that's a friend of ours that's been in here a time or two, Matt Brock. He killed a really big deer with his bow a few days ago.
And it was cool to see he had a doe with it, too.
He did.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did.
Interesting.
Yeah. He lives what he preaches. So, yeah, that's good
stuff.
I
thought you meant the buck had a doe with it. He killed a doe and a buck.
He did.
That's my man right there. Yeah, that's right.
He did. Toxie, I've known about this podcast that we're about to do for about 2 months, and I've kind of kept it quiet. But I am so excited to tell everybody that we have Mr. Tio Kleberg joining us here through the magic of the internet.
That's right.
Welcome, Mr. Kleberg.
Good morning, all.
When I Googled you and looked at all this information about you, from the King Ranch to the Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Foundation and the research that you guys got going on, your hands are all over land that we love and all over protecting wildlife. And it's long overdue that we had you here on our podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Look, I think the first place to start is to learn about the King Ranch.
Yeah,
we've all heard about the King Ranch.
I mean, it's so iconic in our industry and actually across the whole United States as a staple of proper land management and what you do out there. So, I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah. So, could you start there? Let's just take us back in time. Take us back to the 1850s.
Well, 1853, Captain Richard King had a partner in the riverboat business on the Rio Grande, and that partner was Mifflin Kennedy, and they were instrumental in moving supplies and cotton out of the South, out of Mississippi and Louisiana, through Texas, putting it on their boats. And what was interesting is, in order to avoid the blockade that was in New Orleans and Houston, they flew the Mexican flag on their boats. And they had a partner in Matamoros by the name of Francisco Ituria, who was a merchant. So they partnered up with him, and they moved the cotton from Texas down the Rio Grande to the mouth of the Rio Grande, which is Boca Chica, onto British ships. And by flying the the Mexican flag, they realized that the Union would not attack them because it would cause an international incident. So during the years of the Civil War, they moved goods and cotton down the Rio Grande. In 1854 or 55, there was to be a fair, a Texas State Fair in Corpus Christi. And King was very interested because if they opened up a port in Corpus, it would interfere with his and Kennedy's business on the Rio Grande. So he rode horseback from Brownsville to Corpus probably a 2-day drive. It's 130 miles, and witnessed a fair. And while he was at the fair, he met a Texas Ranger by the name of Lewis, had a nickname of Legs Lewis. And he started inquiring about the lands in South Texas. And Lewis said, well, most of them are Spanish land grants, and none of the grantees lived on the land. The reason they didn't is because there was no available water. The only live water was the Nueces River in Corpus Christi, and the next live water was the Rio Grande. So it wouldn't support wildlife, wouldn't support cattle. So the Mexican grantees of that land never came up and claimed it. So there were vast tracts. A lot of these land grants went from 15,000 acres to the largest, I think, was the Casitos land grant, which was about 400,000 acres down near Port Mansfield. And so King asked Lewis, said, well, can you investigate these? Because I'm interested. He said, I'm interested in acquiring some of these grants, but he said, they have to have water. So Lewis went out and identified 2 particular tracts on what was then a stream or a creek bed that had spring water on it, and that was the Santa Gertrudis Creek. And King set up his camp at Santa Gertrudis Creek and acquired 2 land grants, the Santa Gertrudis land grant and the De La Garza land grant. The Santa Gertrudis, I think, was about 15,000 acres, and the De La Garza grant was about 53,000 acres. So he acquired those 2. That those came together on the Santa Gertrudis Creek, and that's where he established his home base. And from there, continued to acquire land grants and would go into Mexico and prove those up with the people that had those rights and buy the land from them. And when he finished, he'd put together about 700,000 acres.
That is incredible.
And he brought his wife, who was Henrietta, from Brownsville, and they set up their home base there on the creek. And that's his headquarters today. The creek is not navigable, but there is a spring, and it does have water year round. It'll tend to dry up some in the summertime, but it is potable water, and that's where he set up camp. So it was an interesting endeavor, because there were no fences, there were no means to contain the livestock that was on the land. But so he went down into Mexico in 1853, 54, and went to a city or a village, Correas, Mexico, that had been droughed out. And he told those people, said, if you'll come with me, bring your cattle, I will take care of you. I'll build homes for you. I'll build schools for you. I'll feed you. And so he acquired all the cattle, and they said, well, we don't have any livelihood if you take our cattle. And he said, no, I want you to come with me. I'll take your cattle, and you all come and work for me up at the Santa Gertrudis Ranch. And they did. I cannot tell you how many of the village came, but there was a big, a large number of them that came. And today, we still have individuals that are now the 8th generation of those people from Correas that work for us on the ranch.
Wow.
That is an incredible story. What a visionary man to be able to see into the future and think about, here's what I need to do and how I need to do it.
And you think about that open rangeland, that there were a lot of wild longhorn cattle on the ranch. So he not only brought the cattle from Mexico, but he was able to gather cattle off the open range and use them. And in the 1860s is when the cattle drive started, and he would gather those wild cattle off of that open range and take them north to the markets.
Wow. Just curious, you mentioned Santa Gertrudis. Is that the origin of the Santa Gertrudis breed?
That's where the name comes from.
Right.
But the origin is it comes from a crossbreed that my grandfather and Bob Kleberg, they were trying to improve the longhorn cattle.
Right.
And in order to do that, there was a rancher that was north of us in Victoria that had imported some Brahman bulls. And they went up there and bought some of those bulls and crossed them, the Brahman bulls, with shorthorn cattle. And the nexus of the Santa Gertrudis breed is a cross between the the Brahman bull and the shorthorn cow.
Right.
And that created, it's 5/8 Brahma, 3/8 shorthorn that made the Santa Gertrudis breed. It was the first breed recognized by the Department of Agriculture in 1940.
How about that? A little history. My dad was in the cattle business, so I grew up on a cattle farm for 15 years or so. Fascinating, but it seems like, and I'm not a real big student of all the details, but it seems like that's trying to get Brahma or Bramer, however you want to say it, into different breeds has been pretty popular. They got some, not to get down the cattle rabbit hole, but they've got some desirable traits that people want, you know.
Well, especially in our environment, we've got a lot of humidity because we're on the Gulf Coast.
Right.
A lot of heat in the summertime. We can get up to 95, 100 degrees, and the English cattle just could not adapt to that hostile environment. So the Indian cattle, the Brahma cattle, were able to. They have a very loose hide, thick hide, so they were able to adjust to the heat and the parasites, because we had fever ticks during that time, and so it was important to have an animal that could adapt to the climate and the parasites.
Yep.
You know, I'm trying to wrap my mind around the amount of acreage that you're talking about. And back in that day, how does a guy look after that much land or patrol it, or is it even possible?
Well, what he did is he set up different camps, cow camps, on various locations on the ranch, and that family would take care of that area. And let's say it'd be an area of 20 or 30,000 acres. They would take care of the cattle on that rangeland under their supervision. So they had cow camps scattered over that immense acreage to let them take care of the livestock.
So during the 1850s, 1860s, so was the ranch a Confederate state, a Union state, or played both sides? What was the involvement during the Civil War with the ranch?
They were on the Confederate side, and the Union actually came to the headquarters on the Santa Gertrudis Creek, and they were looking for Captain King because of his involvement of shipping Southern cotton to Europe, and they came looking for him. But fortunately, he had gotten word that the Union were coming, and he left and went to a neighboring ranch about 50 miles away and hid out until they left.
He had
a
folks
good
looking
place
out. He had folks looking out.
Got
for
a good
him.
place to hide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, my great-great-grandfather, A.P. Cottrell, that all this stuff came from here in the building downtown. He built in late 1800s. He actually, similar to that, he hid out. He was wanted by, and it actually was like the carpetbaggers, I think they called them. and he hid out here in the swamps to the west of town at a place now called Cottrell Lake.
Yeah,
it's
that's
named for him. But he had to. I think he lived off the land, and he was out in the middle of nowhere out here. Actually, not that far from town, but it's a swamp for a while, like a year plus, as they tried to chase him down.
The union wasn't too happy with him.
I bet.
So, Mr. Kleberg, not to distract us off of telling the King Ranch story, but I'd like your thoughts on what was the wildlife on the ranch like back at that time? If there wasn't a lot of water, were there whitetail deer, or were they stocked later, or were there turkeys?
There were whitetail deer. My father grew up on one of the ranches, the Laurellis Division, which is about 250,000 acres, that borders the Intercoastal Canal. He grew up on that ranch, and he and a cousin would ride from the headquarters about 30 miles horseback deer hunting. And he said they could ride all day and just see a handful of whitetail deer. And today, and I think probably the underlying factor was they didn't have any surface water. Unless we'd had a hurricane, there was no water available for the cattle or wildlife. So it was the numbers were small. We did have wild turkey, and down on the Norius Division, which is down by Raymondville, there's a lot of live oak in that area. Sandy, it's a sand sheet, but a lot of live oak and a lot of acorns. So the Rio Grande turkey did very well there, and had an abundance of them back in the mid early 1900s.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew there was a reason he was on here, Bobby.
No, there's not. Lord have mercy.
Well, we accuse him of his mind going there every time. Turkeys, by the way, that's because our mind goes there.
Yeah,
and we're just deflecting it over to him.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's good.
We all dearly love the wild turkey.
We do. It's interesting. You don't often in today's times hear of water being a limiting factor for wildlife. But it was evidently back there then.
Well, we don't hear about it being a limiting factor for wildlife here because we have a lot of water and a lot of annual rain. But I mean, it is a huge factor, especially in elk, how big they get and everything else. Spring rains are a big thing.
So what were some of the things? I mean, were there things they tried and failed on the ranch? I mean, trying to dig wells or
they tried. There were some hand dug wells at the headquarters. Besides having the creek, they hand dug a well at the headquarters that supplied them with their potable water, the drinking water. And it was not until about 1910, 1915 that the oil boom was going on in Oklahoma. And Robert Kleberg, Captain King had died. He died in 1885. And his son-in-law took over after his death. Bob Kleberg Sr. was an attorney who had advised Captain King and later married Captain King's youngest daughter, Alice. And they'd heard about these drilling rigs in Oklahoma. And so he inquired and contracted one to come to Kingsville. He came, and right behind the headquarters, dug a well with an oil drilling rig, and they found flowing water. And there's a wonderful picture that we have in the house of Robert Kleberg and Alice standing by this, looks like a 6-inch pipe coming out of the ground with water just gushing out of it. Mm-hmm. And that probably had to be the happiest moment in their lives because they realized that we had good drinking water if we could just drill down to it. And they were getting good water at about 100 feet.
Pretty shallow.
They contracted drillers out of Oklahoma to come in, and they came in and started drilling wells around the headquarters and then went over towards the coast, the Intercoastal Canal, the Gulf of America as we know it today, and started drilling wells and producing water where those families were that were living on the ranch.
Yeah.
And that's where they went first, to wherever those cow camps were. They started drilling and found very good drinking water. And that was in the 1915, 1920 period.
Oh, that had to be a game changer. at
Oh
that
yeah,
point. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Wow.
that's almost 50. I mean, it's over 50 years of living with very limited water.
Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay. Look, it's a fascinating story.
It is.
And when I read about Google and read about the King Ranch, I see some of these quotes saying, we'll never sell a foot of land. Can you talk about some of the family struggles to keep it together, and what's it like today?
At Miss King's death, she died in 1925. She had set up a 10-year trust for her children. And those three daughters got 160,000 acres of land on the south end of the ranch, which was down around between Port Mansfield and Raymondville. And so that was the first time that any of the land had been partitioned. And Robert Kleberg Sr. bought, after the partition, bought 60,000 acres from one of the heirs and put it back into King Ranch. But the 100,000 acres was given to two daughters, and that land still is, we know it today as the El South Ranch, which still operates on our south fence line. And then in 1953, one of the daughters, Alice Kleberg, told her brother, who was then president and CEO of King Ranch in 1953, told her brother, said they were going to incorporate King Ranch in 1936. She told her brother, I don't want cattle that I can't cut and horses I can't ride. I want my own. So he carved out 120,000 acres west and gave that to his sister Alice. And that property today consists of two ranches. One, the Robert and Lisa East Foundation, which is about 200,000 acres. And then the East family still operates the Santa Fe Ranch, which is south of Falfurrias, and that's about 120,000 acres. So from 1953, the ranch has continued, and it's about 850,000 acres today.
That's incredible. It's larger than some European countries, Doxy.
Mm-hmm.
That's
1,200 square miles.
1,200. I was trying to do the math on that. Thank you.
It is,
Beat me to it.
It honestly is a country into itself.
Yeah.
yeah, it really is.
And the big picture, the really immense admiration for that being continued for well over 100 years.
Oh yeah, that's the magic.
The discipline and adhering to the principles about the land,
Mm-hmm.
in whatever form. They own the land; it's their deal. But to stay there all the way till now is just is so admirable to stay in that lane and not get pulled off of it by subsequent generations. It's very
huge.
very rare. Very
Yeah,
rare.
we're into the 8th generation now.
That's my point. Wow.
And what holds it together is the ranch is incorporated. So myself as a shareholder, I don't own any of the land. I own a share of stock in King Ranch.
Right.
And the numbers are such that the percentage ownership is small enough that if someone wants to get out, we've got the capacity that we can buy them out and not sell any land.
Right. That's amazing.
that is amazing.
Yeah, and by making it the corporation, one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also puts everybody on the same page that's involved, because there will be no money ever unless you create excess to do it with.
Yeah.
You rarely see them get
Yes.
past 2 generations,
That's right,
much less 8. That's awesome.
That to me is as amazing story
Yeah.
as the land itself.
Me too.
Hmm.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Mr. Kleberg, I noticed it in some notes I made that around 1931, someone there in y'all's organization decided there's not as much wildlife around here as there used to be. Why don't we hire a biologist to help us? And I'm thinking, 1930, who was thinking about hiring biologists?
Yeah, there had to be a champion in the family, it seemed like, for wildlife.
Yeah, let me take you back to 1900. Caesar Kleberg was a nephew, and they lived in Cuero. And when Robert Kleberg Sr. was managing the ranch, he had a stroke, and Caesar knew Mrs. King well, and she thought a lot of him. She called Caesar, or got word to him, said, I need you to come help run the ranch. Your uncle is not in good health and he needs help, because he was there by himself. And so Caesar came in 1900, stayed at the headquarters there in Kingsville for 4 or 5 years, and learned what Robert Kleberg Sr. was trying to do. And they were trying everything. They were trying farming. They were trying growing citrus there. They were trying to figure out how to make the land more productive. But Caesar had a vision. He was passionate about wildlife. So he left the headquarters and went south about 1910 and went to one of the ranches called Norris Division, where the live oaks are. And he started, and during that period, the railroad was coming through Kingsville, 1904. And the railroad was coming through, and in order to feed the railroad crews, there was market hunting. And so anything that was edible, they were harvesting. And he realized that the wildlife could not sustain that type of activity. So he went to the governor of the state of Texas, I think it was Governor Neff, and said, we need to put a moratorium on harvesting turkey and deer, turkey for a 10-year period. And they did. And that's when market hunting ceased. But Caesar was the advocate. He said, I'm seeing less deer, less turkey, and very few quail. So he set up for the state to put a moratorium on hunting, and that's when wildlife started advancing.
All about them turkeys.
Yeah.
He was in them live oaks, Bobby.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, it's such a vision. And so fast forward from that point to what I read in the early 1930s, where y'all actually hired a biologist.
Hired a biologist, Val Lehman, and Val was the first, I think, private biologist to work for a large ranch, and Val worked for us until I think like 1975.
Wow.
And set up the principles of game management on the ranch.
That is incredible.
So what were some conservation tactics that were taken? I mean, besides just lowering the harvest amounts, what are some of the other, like drilling wells for wildlife, I would assume?
Water was probably one of the largest things that they thought about, was the distribution of water, where animals didn't have to go more than a mile or two to get water. And along with those wells, they had some dugout in the clay that they would just have overflow from the windmill, from the water trough, going to these water holes to provide water for the deer, the turkey, the raccoons, the quail, the ocelot. So they were very cognizant of the fact that wildlife had to have water along with the cattle.
I bet that made all the difference in the world.
Oh, yeah, you
though.
know it
Of
did.
course it did.
So the white-tailed deer they were native to that part of the world. There was no restocking or bringing in deer from other parts of the world.
No, back in I think about 1945, there was an organization called the Sportsman Club of Texas that was trying to reintroduce white-tailed deer into East Texas, and they actually came. to King Ranch in the late 40s, early 50s, and we were trapping whitetail deer and moving them to East Texas to repopulate. Once the water had gotten established, the deer had gotten established, that we had an abundance of whitetail deer in South Texas. We have about an animal to 27 acres today.
Wow.
I would assume that quite a few areas of the country actually received deer that y'all trapped. I was always told that there was pretty vast for this part of the world, the Erickson plantation down here in Macon, that Mr. Erickson back, I don't know how long, a good while ago, he's been gone a long time, but he had actually arranged to stock some deer from the King Ranch. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I was told.
In
by
Noxubee County?
Historians, yes.
Wow.
So it may have been, and it could have been a long time ago when he did it, but I wonder, did some of that happen with other states?
Yes, they did. They moved deer west and east, and I don't know how far east they went, but I know they went to Louisiana, Mississippi.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that would have been also the deer because there weren't a lot of deer in the state. In one of the first places that was, other than maybe on the river, and some bleeding in from Alabama, was that Noxubee River, to the old Circle M plantation. Y'all know about it too. And so I can remember that those areas had deer early enough that the state was asking for the favor of them to stock the rest of the state from those areas in Noxubee County.
Might have some
So I can
Texas
say
deer
I've
in it.
killed a King Ranch deer.
Yeah, that's right. In Noxubee County.
Well, it's funny that for a long, long time, the state record in Mississippi typical was from the Erickson plantation.
Could be a direct descendant.
Maybe.
It obviously was.
They call him the king.
What did you find?
Yeah, it's just a quote that the Southern Outdoors magazine in 1968 said about Val Lehman. It said, Texas Val Lehman has probably a greater contribution in the future of conservation and wildlife than any man since Noah filled the ark.
How about that?
It's incredible, the vision. I mean,
It is.
he might not even known what he was doing so far beyond and ahead of, because it really didn't catch on more. It even, to my knowledge, only really started catching on in a broader way in maybe almost 1980, 70s, a little bit. I know of a couple that had started, and they were like pioneers in deer management.
That's right.
In like the 70s.
70s,
And there were just a few of them that I knew of. People I grew up with pretty well, the Stimson family was could be considered pioneers in whether it's wildlife law enforcement or wild game management to a degree and all too. But to think that far ahead of what we consider our pioneers in this part of the world, that this guy had the vision, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, we've had a wildlife biologist on staff since Val Lehman in 1931. We've continually had one to help us manage the game.
So y'all have set an example for the state there, and I know there's some great examples in Texas, but one thing about Texas whitetail management for sure is like when the biologists give you a plan, you do not deter from it. There is no wiggle room or whatever. They're so disciplined about sticking to that plan everywhere I've ever been in Texas. And it's got to have, had its origins in this.
I think so.
Mr. Kleberg, would it be fair to say that whitetail management maybe was started in Texas, and Texas is maybe 20 years ahead of other states?
Yeah, I think one of the early pioneers was Al Brothers.
Yep.
Who was,
Yep.
And Al was focused on whitetail deer management and how to raise bigger deer, more inches, and do that through genetics, do that through feed, and do that through age. He was an advocate of letting deer get to be at least 7 years old before you start harvesting them, and
Wow.
he had prescribed techniques that I would say that he would age deer on the hoof, and there would be, say, a 6.7-year-old deer. He said, take him out. That's as big as he's going to get. If you want to grow more inches, you've got to let these deer get old enough.
Mr. Kleberg, let me ask this, not really a personal question, but it's about you. Are you a hunter yourself? Did you grow up hunting?
I grew up hunting at probably my first deer, I was 10 years old, and dove hunted with my grandfather, and quail hunter with my father. I'm an avid quail hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care about white-tailed deer today. I've had my fill of them. I love to look at them. I love to see big deer, but as far as shooting them, I've got that out of my system. I'm purely a feathers man.
Well, Mr. Kleberg, let me just say, I hadn't got it out of my system yet, and I'd love to come down there with you at some point.
Of course you were there. We knew it was coming.
Every episode, he was more frontal and blatant about that. He usually kind of sneaks up on people, but that was pretty much putting it out there.
Yeah, I just went ahead and did that. But
I've always thought it's interesting down there when you're talking about, the 7.5-year-old, and here we're like 5.5, so, but we know, we've always talked about the occasion that those giant deer are killed around here. They seem to be a little older.
Most of the biologists we talk to will usually settle in around 6.
Mm-hmm.
And they readily admit that they can, in some cases, genetics, food, whatever, can increase even at 7.
Yeah,
but
I would
then,
think so.
A lot of them, I think they're just saying they're so close to what they're going to be at 5 that it's okay. But they,
Yeah.
I said about Texas, if their data, their biologists say 7, then it's 7. There's no arguing about it. It's 7.
yeah.
So when you were growing up, did the cattle, the horses, the conservation, was there something where you knew that you wanted to focus in? I mean, like the business of the cattle or the horses, or where did you know that you wanted to end up? And then how does that look like compared to now?
Well, as a young boy, I love riding horses. And I always wanted to be a cowboy. My older brother is 4 years older. We played cowboys and Indians, and he was always an Indian. I grew up wanting to be a cowboy. I went to school and was educated in animal science, and then came back to the ranch and been involved since 1971. And so I've been passionate about improving and leaving it better for my sons and grandchildren than it was given to me, and I think we're doing a good job of it.
The good that men do, right there.
Yeah, it is. So, Mr. Kleberg, would you tell us a story about? I just hear it's legendary the way y'all protect the wildlife on the ranch, and you try to keep poachers at bay, and the efforts that y'all go. I don't want you to give away anything that would tip your hand as to it might give somebody some information, but there's got to be some stories, some older stories through the year that just demonstrate your willingness to protect the wildlife.
Well, give you one fact point that all of King Ranch is low fenced. The only place we have a high fence is where we've got a neighbor that may have 100 acres that puts corn out on their side of the fence, trying to attract our wildlife. So we'll put up a high fence on that neighbor's fence line, but we try to protect the wildlife. We do have our own security people, and by having people on the payroll that are focused on protecting the land and the wildlife, we do a very good job with it. And the other thing that's helped us is in 1980 we started leasing some of the land to third parties, and having them on the land during hunting season. They're another set of eyes and ears that help us. So it is really a good control measure, because they pay good money to have the deer and the turkey and the quail and Nilgai, which is an imported animal that we have, that they want to keep that game on their side of the fence and want to protect it. So we've got lessees that want to protect the wildlife, and each one of those lessees has a wildlife biologist on staff. So they're coordinating with our wildlife biologists as to how many quail should be harvested, how many turkey harvested, how many deer should be harvested on an annual basis. We do a census every year of the white-tailed deer, of the quail, of the turkey, and set up the prescription what should be harvested on each acre of land based on that census.
And that's all privatized, so no state involvement whatsoever?
No state involvement.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Private.
I mean, all vertically integrated, from enforcement to everything.
That's exactly how you do it, because it's just do the math on, what did he say, 800,000 now?
Yeah.
Do the
Yes,
math.
sir.
Pick your number. You know what at least you think would go per acre, and I'm sure there's in some cases is higher. That's such a huge economic
Impact.
for
it is.
the
Everything.
corporation or whatever. But I've seen there's a few of the big timber companies that are doing this now. That mandatory QDM on all wildlife. In that quality management, just like he described, because they're like a lot of the stuff, they were the pioneers. But my point is, you make it more economically viable. You make it worth more money, yet the client's very happy because they're getting a better and better quality experience in wildlife. So it's just smart all the way around. And in the end, you're doing what he's doing with his life. You're leaving the land better than you found it in the process. So it's just such a positive win-win-win.
Win, no doubt.
There's got to be a lot of just trashy folks that are trying to slip and jump across a fence and take advantage of that.
Of course it is.
You think
legend
he's
of that
projecting
place.
a little bit?
Yeah, but I mean, think about it though, Bobby. Though they got a huge perimeter protecting all, but they got all these eyeballs. But it reminds me of the principle of building these fish ponds, and they say you get to a certain size, and it actually manages itself a lot easier. So think how hard it is for someone to get into the interior without them coming down on them or finding them, whatever. Too, and I'm sure electronic age, they can use some things. I mean, you know, I'm sure the perimeter may be an issue, but I bet you the interior is not.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's really helped us is a state law. They used to get caught for poaching, and you'd go to the local JP, and he'd fine them $50.
Oh,
Well, I don't know where you can get a hunting lease for $50, but now you get a fine. If you kill a deer, you pay restitution to the state for that deer, and that may be $3,000-$4,000. So
Awesome.
that has really helped in the stopping of the poaching, and we have hot spots that over the years they know where the activity's coming, and so when deer sit, we've got some tall windmill towers that the game wardens will work on. We'll sit up there and observe at night. You can see a flashlight for a long way at night, and they just vigilance really helps protect the wildlife.
Moving past the poaching part, the protecting the wildlife part, that is at the heart of what you guys are doing. There was I'm going to go back to, and I'm not sure who said this, but at some point they were talking about, okay, look, guys, we're not going to let anybody. I wanted to get this explained because it's a little bit backwards thinking to what we think of now. But he said, you can only shoot a turkey with a rifle. Quail are not to be shot on a covey rise, and
That was Tio Kleberg.
And deer are not to be hunted during the rut. So at that time, I'm thinking maybe shotguns weren't as efficient as they are today. So that you maybe have killed 2 or 3 or 4 turkeys with one shot if you weren't careful, or maybe that's what a poacher would have tried to do. And then and I'm thinking the same thing on a covey rise, and they were just trying to limit the number of birds shot. Could you kind of explain that thinking there for me?
Sure. Your explanation about the turkey was right. And if you use a shotgun and you've got 2 or 3 birds out there, you may kill the bird you're after, but you're also suspect to wounding 2 or 3 other birds. And so the rifle, if you shoot a turkey in the head with a rifle, he's down, and you're not going to get another bird. The covey rise, they would not shoot birds rather than just shoot into the covey rise. They'd let the covey rise go, birds would settle. Then you'd go with the pointing dog and find an individual bird and shoot that bird rather than shoot. Because if you knock a feather out of a quail, as small as they are, you take feather, he's going to die. So shooting a single bird made more sense than shooting at the covey rise. So that was Caesar's rule. During the rut, let those deer breed, leave them alone, and then go after them either before or after the rut so you can increase the population. And that was his theory. He also said you're not going to harvest game around the water hole. Let them have their drink. Let them do what they need to do to stay healthy, and don't disturb them. Don't shoot the turkeys off the roost. Let them let them alone, let them get back on the ground, let them start feeding, and then go harvest your turkey. So he had those guidelines set up back in 1900 that they were rules that were set up. He was appointed, Caesar Kleberg was appointed by the governor to the first, I think it was called the Fish and Oyster Commission.
Wow.
Which today we know of as Texas Parks and Wildlife. So he was one of the early commissioners that there were no state rules. So he got on the commission, and they started establishing rules on how many deer could be harvested per person, how many turkey could be harvested per person. They even got involved in the federal with the migratory birds, and how many ducks and geese could be harvested. My grandfather was in the legislature in 1931, and Caesar's father was also in Washington. And one of the big pieces of legislation they passed was a Migratory Bird Act. Today we know that as the duck stamp. My grandfather wrote that legislation to take the money that was spent buying migratory bird stamp to preserving habitat all the way from Manitoba, Canada to the Mexican border, preserving wetlands for migratory birds. So Caesar and my grandfather were very close in their thinking about how to conserve and protect wildlife.
Bobby,
If we ever
how many different ways can you spell pioneer?
yeah,
no doubt
if we
about
ever needed to hit the horns, we need to hit the
Yeah,
horns.
hit the horns. I mean, at every turn.
Yes, I did not see that one coming. That's an interesting aspect to the
But
story.
they were steeped in the land, not the other noise about the land and all the, whatever, all the money or power or whatever, the land and the needs of the land and exactly what he's living by, genuinely, not just talking about, but genuinely wanting to leave it better than you found it. It's such a cool thing. And it all grows from that one simple life philosophy, which is so cool.
It does. Mac, you look like you're dying to say something.
I am. I was the Nilgai imported on a cattle mindset or from a recreational mindset?
Well, Caesar had the driving force behind that. He saw that the cattle were primarily grazers, the deer were browsers. So he was looking for some other animal that could complement those two on the range, and he contacted the San Diego Zoo in California, and they had some extra surplus nilgai. His first shipment was 8. He brought in 8 nilgai and probably didn't have a soft release. He just probably brought them in, took them out of the crates, turned them loose on the land. Well, in that live oak country, you could have 500 nilgai and never see one. And I suspect that after a period of time, they never saw them and they figured that they didn't survive. So he got another shipment of 12 and brought them in, turned them loose. Again, not a soft release, but just put them in a trap, turn them loose, and let them try to survive. 1986, I brought the pathologist and the geneticist from the San Diego Zoo to Kingsville, Texas. Drove them around, and I said, let me ask you a question. If you brought 8 nilgai here, turned them loose, a couple of years later, brought 12 nilgai and turned them loose, now you have 20, what would happen to them? And he said, with that small population, they would inbreed and the genetics would implode. There would no longer, there'd be so much inbreeding, they couldn't survive. So I'm driving down through the live oaks and I get to the coast and we see a herd of about 10 bulls. Drive a little further, see a herd of 20, 25 females. Drive a little further, see another herd of 20 bulls. And I said, Kurt, there's your answer. I said, we had a release of total of 20 And today we have in excess of 16,000 Nilgai on King Ranch.
Wow.
So the answer was from the geneticist said each one of those 20 had to have different genetics from where they came from in either India or Cambodia to have this result. They couldn't have come out of one single population because that population would have imploded. And I said, well, there they are. We've got more Nilgai than we've got cattle, and they're a great trophy. They're very desirable to hunt. They're very hard to hunt, but we've got a great population of them now on that southern ranch.
They taste pretty good too.
I was going to say their table
Tasty.
fare and
Yeah.
flavor
They're very
is
good to
legendary.
Very good to eat.
Very good to eat.
So, yeah, is there any commercial use for that? I know that since they're probably not considered a native wild game animal, they're free to do it, or maybe someone farms it. But I know some of these food service companies sell Nilgai.
Yes, we harvest them by helicopter, and we actually have to bring in a purveyor, comes in out of Central Texas with his cooler, and we have to have a state inspector there. They inspect them, put them in the cooler, take them and process them, and you see them in restaurants today.
Yep.
I think they're called Texas antelope on the menu.
I don't know anything about them. Have y'all ever hunted them?
I've seen them.
I've seen them too.
Yeah, I've never hunted them. I've eaten them. They're good.
How do you hunt them?
They're slick. Ooh, they're slick.
Mostly stalking. You see them they see you before you see them, and they may be 200 or 300 yards off, and they're probably either trotting or running, and then you stalk them on foot, and typically go around. In the summertime, it's a lot easier because you can go around the lakes and the water holes and just sit and wait, because they will come up and drink. Against Caesar Kleberg's advice, they hunt them around water holes.
Well, they're a little different.
But I got plenty of them now. Yeah.
That's right. He picked them as a kind of a compliment to what was going on. Are they able to eat a different type of food? Are they eating bark off trees or leaves? Can they eat rougher forages like cattle can than the deer?
They can. They'll eat roughage. They'll eat the leaves off of trees. There's enough browse for them that the only time they compete with a white-tailed deer is if we get really, really dry, and they can reach up so much taller than a white-tailed deer can that they'll take that lower browse and eliminate it from the white-tailed deer. But it's we've got so much brush that it's really not a problem.
Was there any other wildlife that was you guys back in the day somebody attempted to stock and that maybe worked or didn't work?
We tried black buck, and their young are so small that I think the coyotes and the bobcats take that population. Then we tried eland, and eland just couldn't make it in this cold weather. We get a wet cold, and they just wouldn't survive. So that's the only two that we've tried that had limited success. But when we saw what the Nilgai would do, we just stayed with that.
In your lifetime, what's something that you're most proud of, either personally or through the ranch, that you've seen?
That I have seen?
Yes, sir.
I think taking some of the better soils and creating a farm. Bob Kleberg Jr., when he came from college, his first job for his father was to run a farm. He hated it. All he wanted to do was be livestock, but his father had him running the farm, which was a small, probably 1,700 acre farm, and he hated it. And when Bob Kleberg died in 1974, I started developing the farmland, and today we've got over 100,000 acres in row crops, which is a great cash producer for King Ranch.
I bet.
But that's probably one of the highlights of my time with King Ranch, was developing the farm, the grain elevators, the cotton gin, feed yard. All of those help the bottom line.
Are you able to put the cattle on the row crop after you harvest, like
No.
on a regenerative or?
No, we
side?
do not. We produce one crop. It's either milo or cotton, and when that crop is harvested, we turn that ground back under and let it gather moisture and wait for the next February.
One crop at a time.
So this may be this really happened to me, and I'm assuming it's y'all's property. But many years ago, through our relationships at Alabama Farmers Co-op, I got to go on a turkey hunt on one of their properties, and there was this huge ag field when we pulled onto the property, and they were telling me the story that they would have to refill the tractor when it got to the end of the rows. That the rows were so long that that they'd have to refuel it and add seed. It one row is all it would do. Does that ring any bells at all, or were they just pulling my leg?
No, some of these fields. I don't know about the planting part of it, but when they're disking up this land, getting it ready, they'll have fields or rows. They can go 4 or 5 miles, and so it takes a lot of diesel to do that.
I can see the seed, but I think the fuel's pretty much a wife's tale.
Yeah, depending on how big the tractor is. Yeah.
4 or 5 miles. Most tractors will go further than 4 or 5 miles on the tank of gas.
Right.
Absolutely.
You couldn't see the other end of the other side.
But
of
your
the field.
seed would always run out
Yeah,
before the
seed's
fuel.
gonna run
That's
out,
for-
no
you know,
doubt.
Yeah,
just-
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that was just.
I think Bobby probably heard something different and wanted to make it more sensational, which is kind of the MO.
I know if they'd have said you had to walk to the other end of that field, it would,
He's thinking about a new book title right now. So
Oh my goodness.
The other end of the field. That's the book title.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, Mr. Kleberg, what about this ranch should we be asking? There's got to be something you thought, boy, these knuckleheads will probably ask me this.
No, well, we got into oil and gas exploration in the 20s, and it was a need because Mrs. King died in 1925. She had a huge estate, and to pay that estate tax was over $3 million in 1925. And she had a huge estate tax. So how to pay that money out of livestock just wasn't going to happen. So Bob Kleberg went to Humble Oil and Refinery, which is today ExxonMobil, and asked them about drilling on King Ranch. And they were not interested. And he said, well, would you be interested in leasing 1 million acres? Because that's what King Ranch was at the time. And they said, yes, we would. And so they made a corporate lease with King Ranch and paid them a bonus for that lease. And that bonus helped pay the estate taxes on King Ranch, where they didn't have to sell any land to pay that tax. And today we've got production on the ranch has gone down dramatically from the 70s, and we have some drilling going on right now, but most of it is old production that's on the ranch, and it say from the peak of the 60s, it's down probably 70% to where it was in 1960, but it's still an income producer for King Ranch.
Well, that's somebody getting creative. Let's figure out how to save this and
without
something
having
out.
to sell 100,000 acres in the land. Then who knows what it was worth, but it certainly wasn't what it is today. And they were going to have to sell a piece of the ranch to pay the inheritance tax.
All right, well, let's turn the page here, guys. Let's talk about the Caesar Kleberg. There's all the foundation, the wildlife conservation. Let's kind of open that. Let's turn to that page and talk about that.
Okay, Caesar Kleberg died in 1946. He had no heirs. He was a bachelor, and he left his entire estate to the Caesar Kleberg Foundation for Wildlife Conservation. That foundation had 3 trustees. Those trustees were to follow the wishes of Caesar Kleberg's will and apply science to the wildlife in South Texas. And I don't know what the value was of that estate, but Mrs. King had given him some minerals, and those minerals were worth very little in 1941. But by 1980, those minerals had increased substantially. So the foundation had about $10 million in it in 1980. I went on. My father was trustee. When he passed away, I took his seat on the foundation, and there were still 3 trustees: Leroy Denman, myself, and Dr. Leach, who was the president of our local university, Texas A&M Kingsville. We were at a board meeting, and Leroy made the comment. He said, this foundation needs to do something of significance. And how can we have an impact? Because the foundation was making some grants to the San Diego Zoo, some to Ducks Unlimited, some to waterfowl pond preservation, making small grants. And he said, we're not having an impact. So he looked at Dr. Leach and said, you know what? He said, we've got a university. You're the chairman of the university, the president. We need to do something that will affect wildlife in South Texas. So Leach said, let me go talk to Charlie DeYoung, who's the dean of the School of Agriculture, and ask him to write a proposal that will address this issue. This was on Friday. And he also carried with him $3 million. He said, Charlie, if you can write a proposal to establish wildlife applied science in South Texas, there's $3 million to get it started. Charlie came back on Monday and had a proposal that today is known as the Cedar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute. And that institute today has 17 scientists. It's got a staff of about 10 people. It's got 65 MS or PhD students, and it is doing applied science for wildlife in South Texas.
That's awesome.
Just unbelievable.
Yeah, that really is. What are some of the projects that they've worked on or are working on now?
I guess the biggest project, well, they've studied turkey, they've studied whitetail deer, they've studied nilgai, they've studied bobcat, fawn survival, whitetail deer, fawn survival in the heat, and the biggest, I guess, the project going right now is the conservation of the ocelot, which is an endangered species, which we have in South Texas. And we're constructing an ocelot facility on the university campus to raise kittens, ocelot kittens, to rewild and reestablish in areas of thorn scrub where we can increase the number. We think there are about 100 ocelot in the wild in South Texas.
Wow.
And that's through observation, that's through trapping, that's through game cams on 2 locations in South Texas. They think there's about 100 living. We're going to trap some of those. We're going to get the semen from wild ocelot. They've perfected the gathering of the semen, and so they're going to take wild male semen, put it into captive female ocelot, raise the kittens in the wild, and then take those kittens and reintroduce them into wildlife. That facility will be ready to populate in this coming summer in June or July.
That's incredible. Mac, I bet that gathering semen from a wild ocelot is pretty difficult.
I would think so. If there's only 100, think about how hard it is.
Yeah,
to
there's
find them.
there's a drama novel for you.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, there's 100 of them. There's 100 of them, and half of them got to be female. So there's
Right.
say there's 50 males. and they cover a pretty good path. I mean, they've caught several of them several times that are have been 10 miles apart from where they originally caught them, and they put tags in them so they can follow them on telemetry with GPS collars.
Well, so there's a website, guys, and I think the best way for our listeners to get to this website is just to Google Caesar Kleberg Foundation or Wildlife Conservation, and you'll get there. But the work that they're doing, it shows some of the projects, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I think if they Google Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute, that's the body of scientists, and they can look on that website and look under any papers that have been written on the various species that they've done the applied science on. And I want to stress applied science because we're not interested in theory. We want to take management problems and come up with solutions. It's incredible the results that come up. I mean, you go down a road, you think, well, I'm going to go from point A to B, but it never takes you there. There's always an offshoot that takes you somewhere else that you find out some interesting fact about how that animal actually is interacting in the wild. So it's very interesting. The Wildlife Institute, I think, has 17 or 18 scientists in each one of them in a specific discipline, from shore birds, migratory birds, white-tailed deer, black bear, ocelot, bobwhite quail. Each one of them has a discipline that they're championing.
The project we were able to tag along with Dr. Randy DeYoung and Charles DeYoung, that's a 10-year study. And so it was, like I said, it was an honor to be a part of that project, but it was a whitetail study, and, they're capturing bucks out of helicopters, and, it wasn't just a year or two study. It was over 10 years, the research they were able to find through that project.
Yeah, and Randy was trying to disprove or prove the antler development and what it took to grow big white-tailed deer, and do that through natural selection. And it was a 10-year study that they did produce some harvesting criteria for what age and how many points that deer should have at a specific age, and they proved that up through that 10-year study.
So actually, many years ago, we did this television show. Richie was out there, and they bungee corded Richie to the underside of a helicopter, but the bungee cords wouldn't hold him.
No.
So we had to get another lighter camera guy to fly with them.
Yeah. Those pilots.
You mean I hate to say it, a dumber pilot? I mean, who would do
camera
that?
guy?
Yeah, who would do that?
Camera guy, I would agree with that.
No, yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to get in the helicopter and film, another thing to be strapped to the underbelly.
Yeah, the way those pilots are flying,
count me out.
Yeah,
it was rough. I couldn't handle it, so we had to get some of the other guys in there.
Yeah, so guys can go to the Mossy Oak Go app and watch that television show. It's up there.
Yep.
It's a 2-part show. It's incredible. Sure was. So look, I would imagine there has been a lot of effort and attention in growing from the state of Texas. How do we grow the biggest whitetail deer we can? That I would think that's been a focus. Is there anything that you can just, even anecdotally, that you can share that you think that you guys have uncovered that might help somebody listening here that they could apply even to their own properties?
Well, I think the three elements that come into growing big deer, and I am not an advocate of these pen raised deer that raise 200 or 300 point bucks in captivity in a deer feed yard. I think that's going the wrong direction. We need to do it with wild deer. But if you have genetics in each herd has a genetics, if you just identify those top deer, the genetics in your top deer, keep them, cull out the underperformers. If you have good feed supply, and that's protein. Feed protein so you can identify those genetics, and then age. Let those deer get 5, 6, 7 years old before you harvest them. Then you can start to identify those white-tailed deer that are superior.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
It sure does. So, Mr. Kleberg, when you think about through the years, could you tell us some of the bigger bucks that you guys have been able to grow and harvest there on the ranch? Are we talking about some deer pushing 200 inches typical, or what's kind of what are y'all trying?
I'd say that in a given year we'll the lessees, we've got 26 lessees on the ranch, and they'll harvest 160 to 180 class deer. The biggest deer that I'm aware of is a non-typical whitetail 236.
Goodness gracious.
There's another non-typical that was harvested about 5 or 6 years ago that I believe was 250, non-typical. And so to get a 200 class deer in the wild with no introduced genetics, it's rare, but we do have them. But a good deer in South Texas is 160, 170 class deer, and we will take those annually.
Yeah, that's a heck of a deer for sure. Well, we've all seen, and some of us have been down around in that part of the world, but those South Texas deer have a look about them, and it seems like they're wide, and they're not quite as heavy as some Midwestern deer, but they grow a lot of inches of antler. That's for certain.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. If you have a good summer, and then a fall when they're really growing their antlers, you can push that 200 class in the wild and be successful at it.
Yeah,
that's a big number.
I'll just go ahead and say, if there's ever like 5 or 10 acres that you might need another lessee on, I'd like to raise my hand and go.
Instead of 20.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to get several of your buddies, and because most of the leases are from 15 to 25,000 acres.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's incredible. That is incredible.
What's your favorite kind of bird dog?
English pointer.
How about that?
Is there another one?
I mean,
That is a good
I
one.
don't know.
That's what
English, and the retriever is an English cocker.
Yep.
The small English cocker, they are tenacious. If you tell them there's a dead bird, they will not quit.
Yep.
That country's got to be rough on a dog, though, out there.
It is. It's to find a dog that can stand. We'll be 45 degrees one day, and then 4 days later be 85 degrees. And to find a dog that can run in the humidity, can run an hour, run in the humidity, run through the prickly pear, the cactus, the mesquite thorns, sticker burrs, it takes a dog with a big, big bottom and heart to be able to do that. And you can bring national champion from Oklahoma to South Texas, and he may run 20 minutes. It's hard. And the only way you find out is put them on the ground and let them run.
How about that? Do you have issues with rattlesnakes and dogs down there much?
Most of these men that have dogs have them vaccinated against rattlesnake. They have them rattlesnake proofed, if you will, where they'll staple a rattlesnake mouth, put the dog on the rattlesnake, and when he makes an effort to get that rattlesnake, they have an electric collar on the dog. Right. They burn hell out of him. And so he associates that rattle, that smell, with something that's not good. He doesn't like that electricity.
Yeah.
No.
And so that's helpful. So a lot of them, and they'll carry antihistamine in case they do get bitten, and then they can get them to a vet pretty quick within, say, an hour from when he's bitten to save the dog. But we do have a lot of rattlesnake, and February is our worst month, and we're in our prime quail season is January, February, because we're cool enough to run in this environment. And then February, February the 5th to the end of February is rattlesnake. They start moving around.
Mr. Kleberg, can you talk about the waterfowl on the property?
We have good wetlands on the coast, and we have probably 85% of the redheads in North America come down and roost in the Laguna Madre. So we've got terrific redhead, we've got green-winged teal, we've got pintail, but we've got good waterfowl hunting all the way from Port O'Connor down to Port Mansfield on the Laguna, the Intercoastal Canal. Good waterfowl hunting.
Wow.
It sounds like that the King Ranch is just a slice of heaven. It really does.
Have you been through the whole ranch?
I've ridden over most of it horseback.
That is awesome.
I could have predicted that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent 50 years there, so I know it pretty well.
I bet.
You probably got to bring a mule just to carry the keys to the gates. I mean,
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Well, guys, this has been really interesting. Mr. Kleberg, we've got a trivia question we'd like to ask you. We do this every week. We have a trivia question. It's brought to us by the Peanut Patch, a company that makes boiled peanuts you can find in gas stations everywhere. Richie, I'm going to turn it over to you. This question is pretty unique, and I think everybody may learn something, including you, Mac, here.
Yeah, it's a unique question. First off, we have a listener here who left a review, Sully30_07. Man, I love these podcasts. One of the best around. So what does Sully win here?
Well, so we've got the thermoses.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, guys, you can find these at Walmart, but it's a great way to keep warm on your deer stand this fall and winter. So, thermoses.
Is that off the oak?
That is, yes, sir.
Okay, an original. All right.
That's right. Yes, it sure is. Good eye.
So here we go. True or false? Many companies that build baseball bats for Major League Baseball teams use deer antlers to harden baseball bats.
False.
Well, let's think about that for a second now, Mr. Kleberg. It's they need something to harden that bat.
I would say the question probably needed to be most baseball. This is the first time I'm hearing it, but use something to harden the bats. And sometimes it would be a deer antler.
Okay, well, if we position the question like that.
You're asking actually, do they ever use it instead of do they mostly use it?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, too. Yeah.
I think the question you asked is probably going to be dead on.
Richie, can you not word these
I'm
questions? a little
sorry.
bit?
I just read. I'm that,
y'all take a consensus now because I'm still false. I went to the factory where they make these, and I never saw a deer antler in their shop.
Probably not going to.
Yeah.
maybe we should read it as in some of the facilities.
Because the consensus here is you're probably the only one that's been in the facilities.
I went to the Slugger facility and got a small bat with my name on it and saw them manufacture hundreds of bats and didn't see a deer antler anywhere in that facility.
Well, look at this. The facility that Bobby got this question from uses antlers to harden their baseball bats.
So now we know the root of the problem is that I thought Richie had originated this, but Bobby did. Now it makes sense. It all makes sense now.
Yeah, it
So,
does.
so I will say it's interesting because Babe Ruth actually would use like a glass bottle or a deer. I mean, he would use multiple
Piece of
things.
bone, yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
he did, I'm sure got copied. Yep.
Yep. So there is a company that makes baseball bats for Major League, and they use a deer antler. There's a little video right there.
Might not be Louisville Slugger.
Yeah,
No.
probably in Louisville Slugger. So I may have, Richie may have worded that.
I don't
question.
imagine that's a super big factory doing it that way either.
No, we just whenever we see a deer antler,
Can
we
you
get
say?
excited.
Can you imagine that spinning bat slinging that point into his hand.
Well, that could be ugly.
It could be a new department for the King Ranch. You get your sheds and send them to Louisville Slugger.
I think artificial intelligence bamboozled Bobby. It's going to happen these days.
Could have.
Yeah, I was in my earlier years. I was a bat boy. King Ranch had a semi-pro team.
Wow.
It was called the King Ranch Cowboys,
What
and
don't
I was
they
a
have?
bat boy, and I never used a deer antler on any of those bats.
Okay, we might just pull this whole thing out. You never know how this goes. Golly.
So growing up playing, did you play baseball growing up?
Yes, sir.
What position did you play?
Center field.
There we go.
Had that speed.
That's right. Also, you're the boss of the outfield when you're in center.
Absolutely, you control the whole field.
Mm-hmm. You and the catcher.
Mr. Kleberg, you look like you're quite a character.
I can be at times.
I bet you'd be a lot of fun to hang around
Well, the
with.
coolest thing, he's just been who he is, and not be anybody else. That's the coolest thing. Yep. So, couple of observations. One is, I was just amazed. It's like, and when you talked about now, there's what started as one guy's like 19 biologists and all this stuff and world research. I was like, it's amazing how this has evolved. And even the part about the land still being like it is, which is crazy amazing. But when you don't let success change you, in other words, with success, you become more your true self. Like you even do more for the land. You do more for the research. You do more to keep it like it was. Not, okay, we're so successful, we'll have a lot of money now, we'll just coast. Or we'll just, quit doing this or whatever. It's just amazing when you stay the course and don't let that success change you, what you can actually do. So what a great example there. Second thing is what a great brand it has become. And then by no means have they tried to manage this to become some brand. I mean, there's a brand of the top selling pickup truck in the world. It's
I've
a
got
King
one
Ranch.
of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the great learning about brands is they're not, the really great ones are devolved because they adhere to great quality and integrity over a very long period. And that became the brand, not some manipulation of, public opinion type of thing. And that's so cool. And then the last thing I want to say is, and I do, it's a little maybe selfish, but it reminds me of my dad, who I just got a call. He's not doing good. I got to go check on him. But a truly great life. And I say this to our people here. Everybody can do it in their own way, but a really great life is if you know for sure, not just saying it, but you know for sure you made a difference in what you love. And he, above all these things I just said, that is a great testament to you and the wildlife part of this, and then the whole group to become what it is. Just so many things to learn about besides the prestige and the success from this. For me, just kind of cranks my tractor.
Well, one of the things you said that is an ongoing battle, and that's the land to keep the brush managed.
Yes.
It wants to go back, and so we're constantly using equipment, using D8 caterpillars to chain and to stack, and we use fire, we use aerial herbicides to spray the mesquite. So we're constantly trying to keep that brush encroachment down to where the habitat is good for the white-tailed deer, and we manage for the bobwhite quail. If the quail is happy, the deer are happy, the turkey happy, the cattle are happy. And so we that's kind of our bread and butter is and the lessees we work with, they contribute annually to a land restoration plan that tries to keep that land from going back to brush, because at one point it was all open range land. Right. But the mesquite after the drought of the 1950s, the mesquite really took over South Texas. So we're fighting it every week, trying to keep it in check.
Wow.
That's probably
I love what he about the priorities with the quail, because if you look at this stuff, which is amazing, all the things he's mentioned, you can find everywhere else. I mean, you're not going to find Nilgai up in Canada or something, but they are so the epicenter of the future of preserving, what happened with quail. So critical that whole area, y'all are centered by y'all, but Texas in general, South Texas, where they still persist, survive, and flourish. So important. So I really am excited. That's the top priority. The rest of it will come along anyway. Deer are so adaptable.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been so interesting. Mac, have you got another question?
I've got one more. I know I could probably Google it, but I want to hear it from you.
Absolutely.
What does the King Ranch brand, the logo, the brand, what does that stand for? Is that a river or is it a W?
It's a running W, and there are several theories, but the one that I think makes the most sense is in the early cattle drives, a ranch had a ranch brand, which was the holding brand that you registered in the county that you operated. Then you had a trail brand. Captain King would go along the trail and buy cattle as he went up towards Kansas. And so each of those ranches had a trail brand that would identify that ownership when they got to market. And early on, they used just a straight brand, a bar brand that could be manipulated. You could take a straight brand and make a T out of it, but you could also take that straight iron and put another brand below it and make it look like a TL. Very easy to alter. A running brand is very difficult to alter. There was a neighbor that he bought the herd from, whose name was Mann, M-A-N-N. His brand was a running M, which was the running W inverted. That was in 1869. He registered that brand in Nueces County, which was a county that he operated in during that early period. Registered that brand and has always maintained that in Kleberg County, where it was the center of his operation. We now operate in 6 different counties in South Texas, but he has that running W as the ranch brand, the holding brand for King Ranch.
That's a good question, Mac.
Well, thank you. I see it every morning driving to work.
What kind of cigars have you got there?
I smoke. I don't smoke. I just chew them. A Henry Clay. This is a Nicaraguan 3000, and I get it through a famous smoke shop in Philadelphia. Ordered online.
Did you say Henry Clay there just for a second?
Yes.
Henry Clay is the county that we're in.
Clay County was named for Henry Clay. Yep.
That's right.
There's Clay counties all over the country, though.
Yeah, he was an infamous senator or representative, but his cigar is a very good chewing cigar. Henry Clay.
Bobby used to chew one all the time too.
I did. And I've just been watching him, and it's just making
wearing
me
you out.
crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, sir. We have thoroughly enjoyed this.
Well, I do. Thank you.
I've heard about this ranch all my life. I hunted around it a time or two in some places, and it's just legendary. But to hear this story, it's absolutely amazing.
I mean, the family and the land is more to me than just the legendary wildlife part of it, because, how did it get that way? Because of what all they did. And they've done it over such a long, like you said, 7, 8 generations worth. It's crazy. And good crazy. Just so inspiring is, I guess, the word.
I think that's a great word.
Yeah. And let's look. It's so over the top impressive because of the size of the landmass and all stuff. But you know what? The same principles, the same intentions can be by anybody. They could have, 10 acres behind the house. They might be running a hunting club that has a couple thousand acres, whatever. It's just, we could learn from that in our own way, no matter how big or small, care for the land like they have. That's the thing that is something to look up toward more than any of it, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Mac, you got anything else to add?
It's just a blast. It was really, really cool.
Yeah. So, guys, I would go Google the Caesar Kleberg Foundation. And there's just so much information there. It's really worth listening to. And I'm looking up at the screen.
They should teach a history class on it at all the major land grant universities.
They sure should. It's a fascinating story. And we just, Mr. Tio Kleberg, we just appreciate you being here with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it. Thank you all for the time.
privilege spending time with you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Why don't you say goodbye?
Goodbye. Goodbye, Bobby.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.